Welcome to the On the Rise podcast, where we talk about time freedom, passive investing through real estate, finance, and mindset. Let's dive in. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I am not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer. All right, welcome back on the Rise podcast, listeners. I'm your host, Jeremy Dyer. I've got another amazing guest with me today. I've got Bob Bernotas. Bob, welcome to the show.
Jeremy, thank you so much. Great to be here.
Likewise. So interestingly about Bob has helped corporate leaders and investors build wealth through smart, semi-passive franchise ownership. Since 1986, he's worked on on really every side of franchising as both a multi-unit owner-operator, a franchise CEO, and a growth advisor. So I'm really looking forward to this topic of conversation today, Bob, because this is really a conversation where, active small business ownership meets passive investing and passive income and kind of at that crossroads. So before we really kind of jump into it and dive into it here, we'd love to hear a little bit more about, Bob's background, your journey, what you're focused on today, et cetera.
Sure. Well, first of all, 1986, man, that makes me sound old, doesn't it? But in my defense, I was a kid in my 20s and I begged, borrow, and stole to get my first franchise open. It worked out and it fortunately set me on my path in the franchise world. But yeah, Jeremy, I'm an old time franchise guy. Got involved in it early. Do you remember the video days? West Coast Video, Blockbuster Video, Hollywood. Yeah, I was a West Coast Video franchisee initially. Opened my first one, and Wayne and Shelton Avenues in Germantown area, Philadelphia. Fortunately, it took off. That unit I opened it in December of 1986. That unit became the top unit in the chain that January, a month later, and allowed me to move on and open a bunch of those throughout Philadelphia, go up to New York with them as well. So that was my initial foray into franchising. And of course, when you have success at the beginning, you think it's just simple, and it's not. I had my failures. I opened in some areas that I probably shouldn't have, and those units didn't do as well. But no, I've been a franchise investor since 1986. I've owned multiple franchise concepts that I've built and sold over the course of my career. I was CEO of a national franchise chain, been consulting for a couple of decades now. I used to consult primarily on the side of franchise companies, helping them position for growth. The opportunity came along to get into this side of the business and work with individuals, franchise investors, groups, helping them find, fund, and acquire the right franchise fit. Because a number of my friends were approaching me and saying, Bob, you know so much about franchising. Can you help me find the right one? And I'm doing it for free. Like, why not monetize this? So that's how I got into the world of this side of franchise consulting. Still a franchise investor. The most recent one I bought was a concept called Game Day Men's Health. I bought 6 units of that concept. Opened the first unit 16 months ago. The second unit opened 5 months ago. I bought 6 of them, and the next one will be opening probably in about 6 months. But love the space. Couldn't be happier with my most recent purchase, and that's what brought me here.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate you sharing your background there. And most of our listeners here are really those higher, maybe higher net worth individuals. Maybe they have a high corporate W-2. Maybe they're commissioned salespeople. They're really looking for a way to really scratch that entrepreneurial itch that arguably. I think a lot of people were, born with that kind of innate desire, to be entrepreneurs, but they really don't know where to get started. So what would you say, are some of the biggest misconceptions that higher income professionals have when they first begin exploring franchise ownership?
Well, and you can look at this question a multitude of different ways, but a lot of people, especially if they're entrepreneurial, they may look at this and say, oh, well, they're going to tell me what to do. I don't like to be that's why I'm getting out of corporate America, or that's why I want to off-ramp from corporate America. So I want to do my own thing. Franchise is not, hey, we're telling you exactly how to do it. They're not dictators, they're partners. They give you a framework. It is dramatically different between a good franchise organization and a not so good franchise organization in terms of how they do that. But the infrastructure is provided, the support platform is provided. If someone wants to do it on a semi passive basis, there's plenty of companies out there that have developed really robust support platforms so you can step into it on a semi passive basis. And not have to walk away from a W 2 job. In fact, most of the candidates that I work with are, in fact, they're looking for something to do on the side, but they're looking for an eventual off ramp from corporate America. So they're looking to replace their income potentially. But in terms of the types of companies out there and the capabilities, it is so dramatically different. One thing I will tell you when I'm working with any company, and I've learned this over the years, franchising has just morphed and changed so enormously over the course of the last 10 years or so, especially over the last 5, 7 years. More and more of these companies are part of a larger entity. I do not work with companies. I try to stay away from companies, franchise companies that are standing on their own, trying to do it. I think the risk is too high. If you don't come into this game as a franchise company with 10 million, I'd stay out of the game. I think it's too difficult to make happen without that. But there's a lot of entities out there that help franchise companies grow. Entities like FSOs, franchise sales organizations. There's dozens of them out there. There's only a handful that are really good at it. However, they're, for lack of a better term, I call them brand aggregators. These are entities that actually acquire brands. It's not just helping them grow and being compensated for that, but it's actually buying the brand, putting it on their support platform, providing the capital, providing the infrastructure to scale, providing the franchise expertise, and then helping that brand grow across the country and spawning successful franchisees. So there's always a commonality. I would tell any candidate that I begin to work with, you're always going to see one of those two entities or possibly both behind any brand I put in front of you. Otherwise, I think the risk profile is too great.
Yeah, it makes total sense to me. It's usually almost always, the jockey that you're betting on, as opposed to, even the horse. And I know you kind of talked a little bit, a little bit about kind of the individual that's maybe stuck in the W-2, and one of the main reasons why they get into franchising is because they want to slowly release that dependence on the W-2. I know, as a firsthand experience, having supported, tens of thousands of franchise owners myself in my previous tech sales role job, right? I know that it's usually not a situation where you're, peeling off that Band-Aid right away, but rather you're kind of slowly moving into, being a 100% owner operator, and that being all of the time that you have deployed. So maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about, what that kind of journey looks like for most people. And in addition to that, what are some of the, popular transferable skills that you see, busy professionals being able to transition into franchise ownership?
Yeah, so I'll take the last question first. The transferable skills typically, I mean, if you have any type of background in corporate America and you have general business skills, basic business acumen, if you will, if you have uh, they look for a level of intelligence. They're looking for the capital to be able to execute on their brand and drive. You want to build, and of course, people skills. That's it. Franchise companies today aren't looking for any specific skill set. Otherwise, they're casting a very narrow net in doing so. So, and you can't teach intelligence. If somebody has that drive, if somebody has the intelligence, they're going to be capable of building something within a framework of that franchise organization. So that's generally what companies are looking for. And your other question, my feeble mind doesn't retain things that much.
No, that's okay. It was really about that individual that gets into franchising with the ultimate goal of being able to completely replace their dependence on their W-2, and that for most does not happen overnight. It's a process that they have to go through, and that process or journey could take 3 to 5 years before they've fully released that dependence.
Yeah, yeah, and it depends upon what their W two looks like as well. Look, I mean, there's so many different areas of franchising that somebody can get into. So what I try to do with any candidate that I work with, or try to ascertain what are your goals? How quickly You want to step away from corporate America? Do you need to fully replace your income stepping away from corporate America? How much income do we need to replace? I mean, usually there's an answer for each, and there's plenty of things that most people can get into where you can replace your income pretty quickly. But and it'll depend upon what they're willing to spend to get into whichever franchise it is. But um, typically, I can tell you my clients or my candidates, for the most part, are looking for a gradual exit from corporate America, maybe over a year or two or 3 year period of time, whereby by that time they're replacing their W 2 income. But what I always try to counsel people, because I'm often excuse me, asked about, hey, what's the ROI look like? What does cash flow look like? And then they start looking at it from that solely from that perspective. But it's not just a question of how quickly can you regain that investment that you made, and are we looking at it on a cash basis? Are we looking at it on it in its totality? But it's also the question of how much equity are you building in something that you purchased? Okay, because certain types of concepts can build equity very quickly, and that equity can translate, depending upon the type of concept it is, to a very significant exit. I'm always of the mindset that the most important thing, or one of the most critical things that you can look at as a potential franchise investor, is what's your exit strategy. Don't go into this without having a reasonable exit strategy. And there's strategies that we can embark on when we're looking at franchise to put a candidate in the best position to be able to sell their franchise. And Jeremy, it may not be from the standpoint, hey, I want to build this for 5 years or 10 or 20 years and then have have great multiple you're able to sell your business for. Life events occur. You may need to sell your business, and I always want to put a candidate in the best position to be able to sell the business if something occurs. And the most effective way that I have found to be able to do that is get them into a brand that we can reliably predict that is going to be sold out in their market. And if it's going to be sold out in their market, the likelihood is it's going to be sold out in major markets around the United States. The problem is, or the rub with that is, if you start looking at the big brands with a lot of my candidates, hey, I want something I recognize. And I got to tell you, the opportunity's over. If you recognize it, no, unless you're in some small sub market and maybe there's territory left, but the opportunity has left the train station a while back if you're recognizing the brand. So getting into those big brands is nearly impossible. The dirty little secret in franchising, it's all about timing. When are you connecting with that brand? You don't want to get into it too early. The risk factor is too high. But if a brand gets into the portfolio of one of the top aggregators or one of the top FSOs and it starts to take off, now we can reliably predict your market's going to be sold out. Major markets around the country are going to be sold out, which puts you in a fantastic position when you are ready to sell your franchise. And the reason it does is because if everything is sold out, let's say just saying you're in your market, um, with the proliferation of that brand in the market, people are seeing the logo around town, they're hearing the ads, they're seeing the ads, they're seeing it on the storefronts, the logo on vans going by. And with that awareness in the market comes inquiries to the franchise company asking, hey, this looks interesting. How do I get one of these? And they're quickly told, sorry, everything's sold out in the market. However, we have a resale opportunity. And that's with a franchisee simply going back to the franchise company saying, hey, it's time. I'd like to sell, or I need to sell because something occurred in my life. If everything's sold out in the market, you're going to have an infinitely simpler time selling your franchise in that market. And if I may make an example, I bought, like I mentioned to you, Game Day Men's Health. Going great, by the way. I mean, my first unit I opened 16 months ago, and it's a reoccurring revenue model. So when something like that I decide to sell, it's going to sell at a higher multiple because it's reliable, predictable income. But my first unit opened 16 months now. I'm tracking over 100K a month in revenue. And at that level, 25-30% drops to the bottom line with that model. There are some that opened before me that have already reached $150,000 a month, even $200,000 a month. So predicting what that is going to look like. And when you consider a brand like that, you have to get into that early because franchise investors recognize the opportunity and it gets bought up real quick. When I got into that brand and I was evaluating it, I couldn't even move quickly enough. Everything in my market immediately disappeared. There was somebody in front of me. So I had to default 2 hours. I'm in southeastern Pennsylvania, about an hour west of Philadelphia. I had to default about 2 hours into New Jersey to buy territory and bought 6 territories there. Everything sold out around me. If I wanted to sell the territories that I bought in New Jersey for twice what I paid for them soon after I bought them, I could have done it because the demand was there. People couldn't get into the brand. I hope that makes sense. But my point is when it comes to an exit strategy, being able to determine or have a good idea of how a brand's going to grow puts you in a position to be able to sell that very, very easily.
I'm Zach Haptonstall, CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Our goal is to help you protect and grow your wealth by investing in the large multifamily apartment buildings. We do all the work as far as sourcing these large apartment buildings from the brokers, doing all of the on-site management with our vertically integrated property management company, doing all the renovations with our vertically integrated construction company. We completely rebrand the exteriors. We will renovate the interiors to our full platinum level scope, which increases the value of the asset to get that profit margin for the investor. If you'd like to learn about how you can partner with us on these exciting opportunities, and go to our website and set up a call with our team.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So much wisdom there. And, the adage goes, begin with the end in mind and certainly have, that succession plan, identified even before you take that, next step, into, semi-passive franchise ownership. And I know that there's big brands and there's baby brands out there, but what are a few different questions that maybe, somebody should ask before they invest in any franchise?
Oh, that's the million. There's lots of questions you should ask before, but hey, what's behind the brand? Is there capital behind the brand? Does the management team have experience? Have they successfully built and grown successful brands around the country? How successful are their franchisees? What do the unit economics look like with their franchisees? So even in the case of a situation where you might have a new brand launching, like I did with Game Day Men's Health. I mean, I trusted the organization behind it, number one. Secondly, I was able to see the unit economics of the corporate units that they held because that brand went from 6 corporately held units all in the same market in Southern California to 900 plus units sold, and the entire United States sold out and Canada sold out within, I think, 17 months. Okay, so I mean, who's the management team behind it? What does the capitalization look like behind the brand? Do they have the infrastructure to scale? Some of the most important things you can ask.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I know you've said this once before that boring businesses win. I would say that Game Day Men's Health is not a boring business, but more of a sexy business. But I'd like to give your feedback, on, why do service-based franchises, often outperform, the more attractive consumer-facing brands?
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you pointed that out. I mean, first of all, you have a situation where nobody wants to do these jobs anymore. So many people are aging out of that category, the category of home service or just service in general, whether it's B2C or B2B, the plumbers, the electricians, the house painters, all those types of companies. And you have situations where, somebody's aging out of it and their kids don't want to take over the business. So what do? They're forced to sell their business. But some of these are businesses that are absolutely needed. I think there is less and less competition in that space, and there's more and more demand because you have another phenomenon going on. The younger generations don't want to do these things. They like, well, my time's too valuable. I'll hire somebody else to do that, which probably more so or just as much as I don't know how to do it. Where my dad could do a lot more things than I can do, put it that way. So I think you have a few things that are working in the direction. Plus, most of these things are also pretty economy uh, resistant or recession resistant concepts, you'll see these do well. I mean, they're needed. Things that if a pipe burst, you have to get it taken care of. And you know probably as well, if not better than me, but the roll-ups that are happening in this category by private equity groups that are buying these types of things. I'll give you one quick example. I had an HVAC contractor come out because my upstairs HVAC air conditioning went out, and he gave me. I had him take a look at it. He quickly evaluated. He said it's a valve in there that needs to be replaced. $1,100. Like, really? Like, but if you sign up for, no, I'm sorry, $1,400. But if you sign up for their reoccurring program where we come back once a month, change your filters, check on things for you, then it's only $1,000 a month. I'm sorry, $1,000 with $25 a month for each unit. I didn't realize that right away. But then, you know what? Never mind. I called another company because I thought they were trying to rip me off. The other company comes out and evaluates it and says, yeah, it's $1,400 a month. I'm sorry, $1,400 to do this. But if you sign up for our reoccurring program, it's $1,095 we'll charge you for. So turns out it was the same company. Okay, two different vans, two different brand names, but it's all under the same umbrella now because private equity rolled it up. I point this out because getting into these types of things also lends opportunity to eventually get bought up at a pretty significant multiple. I don't understand private equity and the multiples and the relationship they have with franchising. It's silly, the multiples, but they're smart people, so they must know what they're doing. But man, would I like to sell Game Day Men's Health to private equity? And I anticipate, I mean, I got into this, my horizon's always 3 to 5 years. I want to get in, I want to get out. And I'm anticipating, hopefully, that private equity is going to come along.
Yeah, that velocity of money can be a very powerful thing. Well, it's interesting to hear your feedback on kind of those, non-sexy, boring, type brands. I have 4 teenagers, children, and my 19-year-old last year as an 18-year-old actually started an outdoor services business. Again, a non-sexy business, but he ended up netting $250,000 as an 18-year-old, right? So you talk about, brands that are recession resilient, AI resilient, right? Those blue collar, type service based jobs can be very powerful and really a hedge, against what happens, geopolitically, or otherwise, from an innovations perspective.
What did he do? What was the concept?
Outdoor services. So I live in Minnesota for those that already know me personally. And here we have 4 seasons. Okay. So there's always, a new season for, spring cleanup or fall maintenance or snow removal or, landscaping. There's all kinds of different projects and things. So he basically just, bought a couple of trucks, threw a plow on the front of one of them and hired a bunch of his buddies to kind of support, his customer base. But the number one thing that he did beyond anything is he's a great sales guy, right? So he knows that in order to grow and scale the business, it has to all be focused on that top line.
Yeah. And look, not everybody has to be great sales guys, but if you have an entrepreneurial spirit and you hire a great sales guy, because even some of those concepts now can be operated semi-passive. Now, fewer and far between than versus brick and mortar retail, but plenty of them have developed a robust enough support platform to allow you to do that. I mean, and then on the other side of it, Game Day Men's Health, it doesn't go into brick and mortar retail; it goes into office space. But my total involvement in that is a 1 hour Zoom call per week. But I have a very competent manager who I'm not suggesting that's how it should be done. I think you should jump into it both feet to start. And I would say the same thing for any of these service businesses. I think they're both best served by jumping into it, both feet for 6 months to a year. Once you have your feet under you, you understand the processes, you have the right people in place. Now you can gradually start taking steps back, and hopefully it goes well.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So as we look to wrap up here, Bob, for somebody that's looking to get involved, right? What's the capital commitment typically, needed? And then are there other creative ways from a financing perspective? Maybe can they leverage old 401k money through a Rob's plan? How does that typically look?
Yeah, I mean, I love the Rob's program. Adds a layer of complexity with the C corp, but still, it's not a worry. But no interest rate, no penalty, no interest, no what's the other thing? Well, there's something else there, but yeah, Rob's program is a great program, I think. allowing you to roll funds out of an 401k or an IRA into a business without taxation, penalty, or interest. There you go. SBA loan is a possibility. There's unsecured loans. There's lots of ways. There's furniture, fixture, equipment, leasing, lots of ways. I work with all the top lending sources to the franchise industry, so I always help my candidates with lending as well.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, Bob, outside of this conversation, which has been tremendous, and I really appreciate the value that you've brought our listeners here, what might be one or two different ways that our audience can connect with you to learn more about getting involved in the franchising space?
Yeah, just go to my website. It's franchisewithbob.com, or email me at bob@franchisewithbob.com. You can get on my calendar. We'll spend a little time together. I'll get to know you. We'll have a conversation whether it's going to make sense for you to get into franchising. And if so, then we go down the path and I help you every way I possibly can.
That sounds great. Well, Bob, thank you so much for the conversation today.
You're very welcome, Jeremy. Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Of course. And listeners, thank you again for jumping into yet another episode of the On the Rise podcast. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the On the Rise podcast. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decisions, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the On the Rise podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.